T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I've turned off the seatbelt sign, which means you are now free to move about the podcast. As a reminder, this is flight number 36 of Citizens of Tech, with service including new solar cells, autonomous buses in Amsterdam, internet for the entire solar system, ultra-dense data storage, the lymphatic system, obscure baked goods, biodegradable beverage links, and more. Also, as a reminder, various trinkets and baubles are available as rewards for your patronage via patreon.com. Goods ranging from stickers, mugs, T-shirts, and even a night out on the town with your favorite nerdy hosts, Ethan and Eric. Trust me, everything is way better than the stuff in Sky Mall. Also, those catalogs are riddled with germs. Don't touch them. Without further ado, we present show number 36, and we lead off with...
Letting the Perovskite solar cells light the way. Eric, I'm going to let you talk through this one. You found this in Scientific American, and I guess the whole idea, we do talk about energy an awful lot on this show. We've got some brand new solar cell tech.
Yeah, newish. It's been around for a number of years at this point. About 6 or 7 years in actual production. It's been a theory for some time. But yeah, these are called Perovskite solar cells, and they remove a few obstacles that current solar panels face. You know, current solar panels are made of silicon, right? They're silicon photovoltaics. And one of the main roadblocks for these is sourcing pure silicon. Now, silicon dioxide is so abundant that in the English language, it's been used as a descriptor for things that are abundant. You know, like more stars than the grains of sand in the ocean, because silicon dioxide is sand.
Exactly, right. I didn't think this was a hard thing to come by.
Right. So silicon dioxide itself, incredibly abundant. The problem is getting rid of those pesky oxygen atoms. The dioxide, 2 oxygen atoms are fused to the silicon atom. And to do that and get pure silicon, you've got to melt that silicon dioxide at a temperature of around 1,500 to 2,000 degrees centigrade in what is called an electrode arc furnace, which is just 3 awesome words strung together.
I don't know what one is, but I want one.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you have to heat it to that degree and use an electrode arc furnace obviously implies that the initial energy output to make pure silicon is immense.
Which is ironic considering we're using it in solar panels to create energy, so there's a big negative there if...
There's an upfront huge sinkhole of energy. Yeah. You know, over the entire life of the solar panel, it will hopefully offset that.
It's the same problem we have with biofuels, though. Just to go off on a tangent for a second, a lot of the biofuels are the same thing. To refine them to the point where you can use them as a proper fuel in an automobile, let's say, like switchgrass, I think has this problem.
Yep.
You have to use so much energy to get it to that point that it's a negative at the end of the day.
What's the point?
So, right.
And battery tech is much the same way. You've got to mine these rare earth metals and things to make efficient batteries at this point. So, you know, it's kind of a catch-22. So one of the other limitations of current silicon-based PV arrays is they're rigid, flat, and heavy. They just work better that in large, rectangular, heavy arrays.
Heavy, you're not kidding. So when I had the solar guy over to the house to talk about, is my house a good candidate for solar power, he stuck his head up in the attic to look at the trusses because of the amount of weight that would be on the roof for the solar array.
Right. Do you have 10-inch trusses? Do you have 12-inch trusses?
Exactly.
Yeah. How much weight can we bear? And
my roof actually was going to need a little bit of reinforcement.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Not bad, but yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, no, these things are ridiculously heavy. So often you see these things in large arrays that are either ground mounted. I think of the Flying Goose Pub in New London. They have a huge, for the size of the building, solar array, and they power their brewery off of it. But it's just I think it's 3 rows of just this huge space of solar panels that is really impressive to see. But at the same time, it's like, why do we need to do this? Or you see them on roofs, right? Like you were talking about, If you're going to do a home system or a lot of industrial applications, you're talking about roof-mounted systems because that's essentially wasted space oftentimes.
The joke being, though, that you put these big, heavy, crazy things up there made of pure silicon and all the rest. They're not that efficient.
Exactly. And that's the third limitation is that roughly consumer grade and even the higher end solar panels are roughly 22 to 25% efficiency. Now, some go as high as 46% efficiency, but those are the insanely expensive ones. Like NASA is one of the only customers using them for, spacey stuff. So those are out of the reach of, Joe Schmo, you and I.
So that's the kind of the solar panels we know and love and have been around for a while. So what is a Perovskite solar cell?
Yeah, so a Perovskite solar cell is actually comprised of a few things, one being an organic material, usually carbon and hydrogen, then combined with a metal. Most often currently it's lead, and then a halogen. Most often right now it's chlorine. So, you've got the periodic table of the elements, if you recall, from either elementary or high school, where you've got things in categories, right? You've got halogen gases, you've got, metals, we've got...
So in other words, not silicon, we've just gone to a whole different material altogether.
Yeah, we're skipping silicon altogether.
Got it.
One of the defining characteristics is that it can be mixed up in batches of liquid, which then can be applied to almost any surface.
So I could paint a solar cell, more or less?
You could paint it onto your entire house.
Huh.
And then it would generate electricity.
But you said this has been around for a few years, so why isn't this technology all over the place?
It's becoming more accessible. The biggest problem is they were not terribly efficient. And when I say not terribly efficient, I mean nowhere near as efficient as current silicon-based PVs.
Which is not that efficient.
Right.
Oh, no.
The good news is they don't require anywhere near that initial energy sink to produce, because we're not talking about thousands of degrees to produce to melt down silicon.
But the output is crap.
It was, but
okay.
It no longer is. So in 2009, Perovskite solar cells had an efficiency of under 4%, which is a far cry from even cheapo depot solar cells that you can buy off of Amazon, whatever. Now in 2016, we've reached over 20% efficiency, which is a 5-fold increase in 7 years. So
over 20. Okay, well, wait a minute. Now we were saying silicon, or 22 to 25. So right,
it's in the ballpark.
Yeah, we're really close now.
And we're basically at parity with silicon PVs at this point. So you get all the benefits of it being that lightweight material and the flexibility of being able to apply it to almost any structure. And
the same efficiency we're used to getting out of solar cells.
Correct.
So is this going to take over the world soon?
It kind of remains to be seen. Silicon photovoltaics are, essentially a mature product at this point. You know what you're getting. It's a known entity. There may be some incremental improvements, but we really are reaching the point of diminishing returns. It's almost Moore's law as far as generating more efficiency with silicon PV. Perovskite tech is still new, alternatively, and it's developing and advancing, and it's advancing while being already nearly as efficient as silicon-based. It's much more readily applied, it's lighter, and requires less resources and energy to produce. So it looks like the future is bright, no pun intended, for Perovskite solar cells. The big questions, the unknowns are, how durable are they long term? We don't really know that yet because it's only been 7 or 8 years since these have been developed.
And the production form factor is not going to be, here's a can of Perovskite solar cell, go paint your house and hook up some wires. It's going to come in, probably something we're more familiar with. It's easily consumer consumable.
Right. Yeah, I don't foresee, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't foresee, Perovskite solar cell spray paint or whatever. But who knows? I could envision it more being like a product you roll out and tack down. Almost like when you build a house, you have that wrap that you put around the house, except you'd be putting it on the outside and it would be generating electricity.
Spray your pets. Let them run outside.
And remember to have your pets spayed or neutered. The big thing is we're already able to, with the current efficiencies and development, begin changing the lives of the 1.2 billion people on planet Earth who lack reliable electricity.
So this is a huge potential boon for the developing world.
Right. Because you don't need massive, infrastructure and structures to be in place to hold up these solar cells. It's really just apply this stuff and hook up the circuits and, you're in good shape. All these equatorial regions that don't have good access to power, well, the sun shines most of the day. So, this is a good application for the existing technology. And as the technology improves, then it's only going to get better. So, yeah, Perovskite solar cells. Keep your eye open for news developments around that.
Well, from solar power, we turn our attention to the International Space Station because they're getting a network upgrade. And this article comes from futurism.com, link in the show notes. And this is all about internet for the solar system. And, okay, so Eric and some of you that listen may know I'm a network guy. I build enterprise computer networks for a living, done that for 20-odd years. And I can tell you, when you build networks, latency is a problem. Latency meaning, how long does it take for a message to get from me to you, and then you to acknowledge that, yep, I got the message. And when you get into longer distances, say global telecommunications, the further away you go, the bigger of a problem this is. So, for example, I used to do a bunch of networking. Actually, Eric, when you and I worked together, we worked with some companies that were in Southeast Asia or India. And when we'd connect to them, the communications latency was around 300 milliseconds, 300, 350 maybe, all depending on a lot of things, which makes the network feel slow.
Right.
If you are in America and you try to hit a server that's in New Zealand, let's say, sitting in a data center, and you're stateside somewhere, it's just going to feel slow. It'll load. You'll get the web page. It's just going to be like, oh, it's sluggish. What's going on? Latency. You're talking hundreds of milliseconds further than you typically do, and because of that, I sent you a message. Did you get the message? I did get the message. Okay, great. I'm going to send you another message. All of that back and forth really adds up.
Yeah, and when you think about 300, 350 milliseconds, you're talking a third of a second for the first bit of information to reach the destination, and then it's a third of a second for the response to come back. You're talking about sub-dial-up speeds for information to transfer back and forth.
Potentially for the initial conversations,
right.
Yeah. And this is why if you've ever gotten Wi-Fi on a plane that uses satellite internet service, or if you're using HughesNet or something,
the
which
ping time is terrible.
It's abysmal. You're into 700 milliseconds plus.
Because it's a round
pretty
trip.
often, because the round-trip times are so egregiously long
your
compared to
throughput
terrestrial-based stuff.
Astronomical.
Could be good, but that initial setup
that ping is, yeah.
All right, now take that problem and scale it out to the solar system. Okay,
to millions of miles and billions of miles.
Millions and billions of miles. And as Douglas Adams points out in his documentary, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, space is big. You won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. You may think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. And that's okay. I'm being funny here, right? But he's actually got it's dead on point.
Absolutely
for this.
True.
Completely true.
Yeah.
So networks going long distances because the sender wants to know whether the recipient got the message. Seconds, minutes, or hours, depending on how far away you are. That's just too long to wait.
Right.
For the way we think of modern telecommunications networks that work in the Earth.
And we're talking about at the speed of light. This information is traveling, and it takes
it's
up
still
to
not
hours or
fast.
days. Right.
Yeah, because of the distance is so, again, mind-bogglingly big.
So
right.
How do we overcome this?
New technology we've got here. DTN is the acronym, which stands for Delay or Disruption Tolerant Networking. And so the big idea here is if you're communicating in space, you've got this distance problem, you've got this latency problem, and you've also got kind of a unpredictability in the path. And so you need a network that can handle both this distance problem and the fact that you may not have a reliable path between you, wherever you are in space, and wherever it is you're trying to communicate to, whether it's another satellite, whether it's a planet, and things getting in your line of sight, because we're talking about line of sight communications here, radio waves,
right,
to traverse space. And so disruption-tolerant networking steps in here, and the basic idea is store and forward. You're going to relay a message, or maybe even part of a message, and then relay it point to point to point until it finally makes it to its destination, the entirety of that message. All parts of the message can, once it's received at the end, it can be reassembled, and now you've got a whole message. And that's a way you can deal with this problem in space. You've got relay stations in space. Let's assume you send a message to a relay station. He grabs the message. He holds on to the message. Now he's got it. Okay, now when he gets an opportunity to send it to the next relay, whatever that might be, he forwards it along. And it gets forwarded along however far it's got to go in this store and forward fashion until it's finally delivered to its endpoint, rather than you in the far reaches of space going, I need to talk to Earth, which is somewhere out there, aiming and firing and dealing with speed of light and dealing with an asteroid belt disrupting your signal and whatever else might be happening.
The magnetosphere of Jupiter. And
instead, it would be, what's the nearest relay station to me?
So you're talking about node to node to node to node to destination communication.
And that's the model that they're coming up with for space, for the solar system. And the International Space Station is going to get some of this.
So it's almost like when we talk about the internet for the solar system, we're not talking about TCP/IP networking here. DTN is the protocol.
I haven't read the details, but I don't think TCP/IP that we know and love from the internet is likely to be the protocol.
Gotcha.
TCP/IP is that acknowledgement problem that we were talking about earlier with latency, kind of explaining what happens when we're trying to talk across the globe.
SYN, ACK,
all that back and forth stuff. I'm suspecting that there may be some of that between each node, but not from end to end and something.
Not in that classic.
Not the way we think of it.
Right.
Okay, so this said, if you actually want to know more details, you, Eric, or you as listeners, there are problems on the Earth that are very similar in nature to this problem we have in space, and there's a lot of projects and work being done around disruption-tolerant networking. So there's open source projects, there's research projects going on, and rather than try to take you through a bunch of them, I'll just tell you, go to Wikipedia, search for DTN, Disruption Tolerant Networking. There's a great entry there that lists a whole bunch of different projects and research that's going on that could give you lots of information. But we'll give you one group that I found that was pretty interesting. That is the Delay Tolerant Networking Research Group. And just a quote from their website, the way they describe themselves, the Delay Tolerant Networking Research Group, we are concerned with interconnecting highly heterogeneous networks together, even if end-to-end connectivity may never be available. Examples of such environments include spacecraft, military tactical, some forms of disaster response, underwater, and some forms of ad hoc sensor actuator networks. It may also include internet connectivity in places where performance may suffer, such as developing parts of the world. So again, if you think this is cool tech, this is really interesting, there's Earth-side applications for this too.
And there's that developing parts of the world application again for another form of technology.
And one thing I remember seeing just recently was I think it's Toyota was working on this for the Outback in Australia, where each car is a Wi-Fi node that would work as in this store and forward fashion, where there's nothing out there, but if there's other vehicles, your vehicle could become a relay node in this network out there in the Outback.
So like if I'm out in the Outback and I say I'm looking for information on XYZ, there may not be an internet connection, but someone's Toyota may pass that to someone else's Toyota to someone else's, and then it goes out, finally gets to
and eventually
Sydney
it gets to where
or
it
Brisbane or wherever, whatever. And then eventually it will make its way back. So it
ain't speedy, but
or...
it's gives you some form of connectivity and messaging ability.
That's kind of mind-blowing to think about.
Yeah, and that exists today. I've seen there's some demos on it on YouTube. I want to say we might have even mentioned it on a show. I don't remember. But yeah.
That's wild.
Cool stuff. So, Eric, what's going on in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so Amsterdam, I want this autonomous bus in my area.
Mm-hmm.
So Mercedes unveiled the Future Bus. And the Future Bus is this obviously futuristic-looking, awesome, cool designed Mercedes bus.
Is it a bendy bus?
No.
Okay.
It's a regular bus.
Okay. So you did say cool, and I thought of the bendy bus.
Except it's not a regular bus because it's autonomous.
Oh, autonomous like autonomous.
Yeah.
Oh, a self-driving bus.
Yeah,
so instead of just killing like one person, kill a lot of people?
Oh, yeah. All at once. Boom.
Awesome.
Done. Yeah.
Love it.
So it uses an autonomous driving system that Mercedes developed called City Pilot. And City Pilot is similar to Highway Pilot, which Mercedes is actually already testing out and using to enhance the efficiency and the safety of their semi-trucks, or lorries for you folks in the UK. It uses special bus lanes at up to 43 miles per hour. That's 69 kilometers per hour. and they actually did a demo run. It traveled 12 miles on a route on the streets of Amsterdam, stopping at various stops and etc. The Future Bus highlights the high-tech nature of public transit in the future.
So hang on a second. So, okay, now we know about Google self-driving cars.
Yep.
That's, there's some aspects of GPS.
Mm-hmm.
There's radar. There's laser. I believe all of these technologies feed into a central system, and then there's been programming that's been going on and on and on for years so that it can safely interact with its environment in unexpected situations. Is it basically this, but in bus form?
Pretty much, more or less. There's some optical recognition. It can sense traffic signals and react to it appropriately. It can sense, pedestrians and react appropriately, and these things. The sort of lame thing about the Future Bus is that the Future Bus itself does not actually represent what Mercedes plans to roll out in the future.
Oh, it sounds like a Subaru concept car. That's beautiful. I want that.
And
that's amazing.
Never get it.
And you're never going to get it ever because the new car is going to look nothing like what's on the stand.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, Mercedes.
You fickle temptress. So, I mean, the Future Bus features this, lounge area for riders with inductive phone charging pads, interactive info displays, and all this. But yeah, they don't anticipate bringing out a fleet of these buses into the world to actually be used.
Still though. I mean, I'm sure if they're putting all of this effort into this proof of concept, they're going to do something with some of the technology.
Yeah, they're going to take bits and pieces of it and bolt it into the existing fleet and the near-term future fleet to enhance the efficiency and, obviously have autonomous buses running in various cities around the world. So the technology isn't going to be a waste, but this cool-looking bus that you see in the Mashable article and on Mercedes, publicity sites and all that, you're not going to see that exact bus in that exact form, but the technology will trickle into future buses.
It's still cool. I mean...
It is, and it's almost a shame at the same time. But
it's funny. So I made that crack about instead of just killing one person, you can kill a bunch of people. But if you think about it, really the point of autonomous vehicles ultimately isn't for individual transportation. I mean, I think there's going to be a big move to consolidate transportation, of people, because if you truly make autonomous travel safe, the algorithms have been honed and. Our transportation infrastructure is such that it would support autonomous vehicles well. I mean, ultimately, wouldn't it be fine just to get on a bus with everybody else? Why wouldn't you go that route? You bring put fewer vehicles on the road, which actually will reduce crowding, improve efficiency of transport,
reduce maintenance costs for the roads themselves.
In theory, the roads would be safer because there would be fewer bits of metal flying about the road at 30 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour or faster.
Right.
So logically, you'd go that way, I would think.
Yeah, my wife and I have discussed this a few times where, we talk about driving on the highway is just less and less safe lately because people go so fast and, people are distracted. They're texting on their phones. They're, distracted by their infotainment center.
How many people have I seen off the road and you're looking at them like, it's a dry day in New Hampshire. What happened?
What happened that you are now in the embankment?
With your car overturned or in a tree and you can only assume they're staring at their phone.
Right. So if you remove that human distraction and element of error, that margin of error that being human automatically incurs, and you have really good algorithms and really good safety nets in the AI to say, okay, something's wrong, we can't operate or whatever, then it seems only natural that it's going to be safer overall. We're going to have some kinks in the system initially, like with the Tesla crash lately, in what, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, recently. But again, that was an issue with the software not being able to do its job because of the design of the other vehicle.
Yeah, and I think on the whole, if we're sane in our news reporting and not being just sensational, an automated car, an autonomous car hit a tree or whatever the circumstance will be in some imaginary future story, I suspect what's going to happen is people that are killed by alcohol, human errors, whatever, are going to be off the charts far and away more and higher stats leading to death than the autonomous vehicles.
No question in my mind. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Eric, you found another story here. Brainiacs discover lymphatic links in the brain.
This comes to us from the University of Virginia, so virginia.edu. So University of Virginia researchers presented a paper recently, 4 days ago at this point. They presented this paper that detailed the presence of meningeal lymphatic vessels. So you've heard of meningitis, right?
I have.
It's an infection of the meningeal layer between your brain and your skull. So basically, the meningeal tissue was thought to be this blood-brain barrier sort of tissue, and it turns out it's slightly more than that, which blew away the researchers that were working on this.
As in, it's not just a simple function. Oh, we know what that does. I mean, there's more. In other words, there's more to it than what we had thought as science all along.
We thought we knew everything about it,
yeah,
and it turns out we didn't, and they made an amazing discovery here.
Okay.
The unknown going into this was how, if at all, does the brain communicate with the lymphatic or immune system, and that was largely unknown. Okay, so to set this up, a researcher called Antoine Louveau, who is a postdoctoral fellow at UVA, developed a method to mount mouse meninges onto a single slide so that they could be studied and scanned for structures. He was not alone in this. He had some expert surgical help from another one of the fellows. This was a breakthrough. This technique had never been performed before. And when they analyzed the meninges, they noticed what appeared to be vessel-like structures inside of it.
Like something that would carry blood or fluid in some way.
Because they've never been able to analyze them wholesale like this. So the ability to look at these in this new way gave them the ability to detect these structures. So they tested these structures. Turns out, sure enough, they are lymphatic tissue. They are lymphatic vessels. So in essence, a long-studied part of the nervous system has just yielded new information that will help combat disease in many ways, such as why do multiple sclerosis patients have immune system attacks? Or how does the brain affect and implement immune responses? That was sort of an unknown. Is the brain even involved, or does the body just react, And
so now there's a piece of the puzzle that we can study that we didn't even know was a thing to study before.
Right. Now, systematically, we can research what happens when X happens. If X, then Y, okay, then we find out the outcome, and now we can study why this happens, what signals are sent, and all this. So this opens up new doors for how we treat autism, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, and other brain disorders. And these can all be, again, studied systematically. So it's a huge breakthrough. One of the guys that was working on this, I forget the gentleman's name, he said they're literally going to have to rewrite the textbooks.
Huh?
Just when you think
this isn't a footnote, this is rewrite the textbook time.
Yeah.
Once we get through this on the human side,
so the brain studying the human brains studying the human brain is the universe knowing itself, I think, as someone said.
So are you going to donate your brain to science, or?
I'll donate everything to science. That's awesome.
No, I mean like now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, get the buzzsaw.
Oh.
So you found something about ultra-dense data storage is here almost.
PopularMechanics.com brings us this story, and you know how we can store data with tiny magnetic particles on hard drives? Right? We've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
Or in memory and so on.
We're talking about three-phase storage.
Very tiny types of storage that we can do that is at production now. It's very small. What's going on? Okay. That ain't small enough. Try atoms. Could you store data at the atomic level, which is something Richard Feynman wondered about back in the day, back in the 50s?
Right.
Okay. Well, it turns out, yes, you can. Specifically, you can store data in this format, atoms of chlorine laid over a copper plate. Now, there's a lot of catches here, so bear with me. Here's how this all works out. If you chill this copper and chlorine arrangement down to minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit, which is minus 196 Celsius, the chlorine atoms arrange themselves into a square. Okay, so copper plate, chlorine atoms, make it really, really cold, chlorine becomes a square, and the middle of the square is this dark spot, right? No chlorine atom in that one in the middle of the square.
Yep.
Okay, so if you're picturing this in your mind now, we can move the chlorine atoms around. We've got light spots where the atoms are and dark spots where they are not, and form a checkerboard grid of atoms. And you do that using what the article says, to quote it, a tool called a scanning tunneling microscope, which is a bit like an ultra-thin needle that can nudge atoms up and down, left and right. So now if you imagine this, we've kind of like set this copper plate with chlorine atoms up so that we can begin to store data. We froze it, made it super cold, but freezing is really too imprecise of a term.
Right.
We super cooled it to an amazingly low temperature. The chlorine atoms, in response to that cold, arrange themselves on the copper plate into a square. We use the scanning tunneling microscope to arrange those atoms now that they've arranged themselves in the square, and it gives us the ability to control them into a checkerboard, like a grid style thing. Okay, now we're at ground zero. We can now use this to start storing data. We've got a grid of chlorine atoms. So picture now, you can move the atoms around like a sliding block puzzle, and you can make patterns with them that represent data.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, so there's depending on the size of your copper die or whatever you're, sliding these around on, you could have thousands or millions or billions or trillions of combinations.
Extraordinarily dense. If you read the article, there was a diagram that shows a number of different patterns that could be arranged. They were using pretty small patterns, just 3 by 3.
Yeah.
Like this is beginning of file, this is end of file, and this is a 0 and this is a 1, and so on. And they kind of take you through what's there.
But then if you extrapolate and you think, okay, 64 by 64 and 128 by 128, you're talking about orders of magnitude more storage.
If you needed that, I mean, if you're still talking about binary data,
right.
That's sort of irrelevant because you're mostly focused on the zeros and the ones. But yes, the point is that you're now getting 0 and 1 storage into this extremely dense, now at atomic level, which gives you the ability to, I think the article said something like the Library of Congress on the head of a pin or whatever it was.
Yeah,
they really made
incredibly ridiculous.
Super. What the head of a pin is a bit of an exaggeration.
Oh, the
but
pupil of George Washington's eye on
a
dollar
bill. That's right.
What it was.
Yep, that's what it was. And
that's astonishing data density.
And 3 to 5 times greater, I believe the article said, than what we typically get today. So quite extraordinary. The challenge being, you do have to freeze the whole thing to something you can never ever do outside of a laboratory that's very specially equipped.
You need, like, liquid helium.
And how many of us have scanning tunneling microscopes around to move things around at the atomic level? None of us.
There isn't just an app for that?
And it's super slow. I mean, it's incredibly slow right now. It takes a minute or two just to read a few sentences out of this storage array.
Sure.
Which,
I mean, this sort of goes back to the whole data storage with DNA thing that we talked about a few shows ago.
Yes.
Where the density is huge, but it's almost like using tape backups.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you can store 1.6 terabytes on this tape. It'll take you 43 hours to read it back. But,
yes.
And God forbid you want to actually go find a single file on that tape and restore it. It's sort of the same quandary.
It's getting better, though. I mean, the guys that are working on this project, guys and girls, I don't know who, they didn't really specify who was on the team.
Yep.
They said 1 megabit per second is coming fairly soon, which is not fast by data standards.
No, but
that's usable at least. A megabit per second is reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't. Yeah, Netflix isn't going to be using it, but
no, right? No, exactly. But at least it's at a point where if they can figure that out that quickly,
if it's 1 megabit now, give it 20 years or what? Yeah, exactly.
Someone will figure out between parallelization of processes and whatever other techniques.
And, yep.
But the real trick is atomic stability, and
right.
if you think about the whole reason why they're supercooling this, it's so you have the stability and that the patterns are retained when the atoms are moved. If you don't supercool, you don't have stability. You can't store the data reliably. So
when that thaws, your data's gone.
Gone. Scrambled. Yep. Unpredictable.
That's a bad day if you're storing critical data in there.
And therefore, that's seems to be a bigger problem. This seems like a proof of concept, you know?
Oh, yeah.
They found chlorine and copper. Maybe they'll find other combinations that are going to work better and can work at real-world temperatures.
Realistic temperatures, exactly.
Still, atomic data storage. I mean, dude, how cool is that?
It's amazing. I'm geeking out over here.
Well, Eric, you have some content you like?
Yeah, so as folks may or may not be aware, I actually became the owner of a 2017 Chevy Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid. So content I like is PlugShare.com. If any of you out there drive a plug-in hybrid or all-electric vehicle like a Nissan Leaf, a Tesla, Chevy Volt, any number of a Mitsubishi iMEV, PlugShare.com lets you research, at least in the U.S. I didn't actually check to see if there's any global support for this, but it lets you check in your area or the area that you're currently in where the charging locations are. So you can contact other users if they choose to share their home charger with fellow PlugShare users. You can contact them through the platform, or they can leave their phone number. You can give them a call, etc. It also details publicly accessible charging facilities. Actually, this evening, Ethan picked me up from one of the charging facilities because I plugged in at a local credit union that has a level 2 fast charger that I wanted to try out as a first run. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you can plug in either where you are, where you're going. So if you're going on vacation, you can scope out locations to charge your electric vehicle.
Now, Tesla's got chargers across the nation. Is that any use to you?
Absolutely not. No.
Oh, I was hoping the answer would be yes.
No. So they use a level 3 charging system. The Volt goes level 2 only, and Tesla's system is completely proprietary. So it only charges Teslas.
Oh, well, that's no.
It does it really fast, and
so
maybe someday it'll be an open standard. I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough.
So, yeah, PlugShare.com. If you have an EV or a plug-in hybrid, check it out. So, Ethan, did you learn anything today?
I did indeed. I learn things every day, but this is one of the weird things that stuck out to me. There's a show I like to watch called The Great British Baking Show, which shows up on PBS here in America. And I was introduced to a Spanish Windtorte. What the heck is a Spanish Windtorte? I'm just going to read you the Wikipedia entry on this. A Spanish Windtorte is an Austrian dessert. It is one of the most complex to create and serve, as it is composed mostly of meringue and whipped cream. It consists of rings of meringue that have been baked into a cylindrical form with a bottom and a top lid. The piping of the meringue and the subsequent baking process require patience and careful attention to detail, or the cake will not be symmetrical. When the shell of the torte is done, it is then filled with whipped cream, fresh berries, usually strawberries, chocolate shavings, and or currants. Because whipped cream and meringue dissolve quickly, the torte must be served immediately. Freezing can retain the dessert's consistency, but the flavor may be compromised. Again, Spanish Windtorte, and it's not Spanish, it actually is Austrian. I'd never heard of it before, and I thought it was the coolest thing.
I had never heard of it either, but we actually watched that show too. So, yeah.
What about you, Eric? Have you learned anything?
Yes, I did learn that a brewing company has developed 6-pack rings that are not only biodegradable, they're also nutritious. They're made with the byproducts of brewing, such as wheat and barley.
So not necessarily delicious, but at least nutritious.
Yeah. They are edible, and they break down in short order. So if they're exposed to, oxygen and water, they'll biodegrade very quickly, all while being just as strong and effective as the plastic ones that we're all familiar with. Now, consequently, I found out in researching this that since 1989, plastic 6-pack rings produced in the U.S. are highly photodegradable, so that they become brittle within days of exposure of sunlight, and they easily break to prevent animals from getting strangled, because that was an epidemic prior to 1989.
It was. I actually remember pictures of that because there was a big, I don't know if PETA was involved or who it was, but there was a movement kind of illustrating poor critters getting strangled by these 6-pack plastic rings that somehow or another they got their heads in, which, believe it or not, I have a cat who loves to lick plastic bags, and inevitably he's sticking his head through the handle of a plastic bag that comes back from the grocery store, and it's like, cat, you're going to die one of these days. You're going to die. You're going to choke yourself. Anyway.
So all this time I've been cutting the rings for my soda and all that. I guess it was needless, but
No, because
I still feel a little better doing it.
Well, the animal, would be sitting in the sun. The plastic would biodegrade, and I'm sure it wouldn't have choked to death by that. I mean, sun and biodegrade, that happens fast.
Yeah. Super fast. And with that, we've come to a gentle landing, fair citizens. This podcast is taxiing to the gate and will soon disgorge itself. Or something. Maybe this metaphor has run out of fuel and we're actually all over the runway burning with emergency vehicles all around. However you like to picture it is good with us, especially if you're a Patreon patron, because as hard as flying planes is, making podcasts is harder. So show your love at citizensoftech.com and keep us airborne. Also, see you on Reddit. We're totally there in the Citizens of Tech subreddit. Bring your best nerd articles, and maybe we'll talk about it on the next podcast. And if we do, we'll call you out for being so awesome. Because awesome you are, all of you. See you next week.